Hey, welcome back to Movies in a Bottle, where today we're covering one of the best parody/spoof movies of all time. Let's get the obligatory mention out of the way that the Austin Powers series is a parody of the James Bond series, but if Danger is your middle name, feel free to take a drink of the beverage of your choice every time I mention James Bond. Now, if you want to learn about all the random inspirations for Austin Powers that aren't James Bond, feel free to stick around to the end of the video. But with all that being said, let's freaking roll film already. This wild ride begins somewhere outside of Las Vegas in 1967, where a temporarily nameless supervillain is heartlessly casting all but two of his mercenaries into flaming trapdoors for failing to capture Austin Powers. And then, naturally, he addresses his two remaining henchmen, Mustafa and Frau Farbissina, to enlist their help to stop Britain's top agent, Austin Powers. And you feel free to make sense of Dr. Evil's logic there while we jump to the titular Austin Powers theme song. With more swagger and mojo than he knows what to do with, Austin Powers does his best to give us a proper spy movie introduction sequence, but he spends most of it getting mobbed by a sea of adoring and attractive fans until Mrs. Kensington shows up to his rescue. After she kindly turns down Austin's heavy-handed swinger invite, they get a call from Basil Exposition from British intelligence, who gives crucial exposition that Dr. Evil has set up a trap for them at the Psychedelic Swingers Club in swinging London. The immensely recognizable and catchy Austin Powers theme song, Soul Bossa Nova by Quincy Jones, wasn't written for this movie like my dumbass thought all this time. Mike Myers was just a huge fan of Quincy Jones growing up, so he used it for the theme, but the song came out way back in 1962. When the agents arrive at the club, everyone is having a groovy time dancing, including the cute bartender hanging out with Austin. However, whenever Mrs. Kensington reminds him that they're looking for Dr. Evil, he punches out the bartender that totally wasn't swapped out by a burly man between scenes. And sadly, we wouldn't get much information from the spy because a hidden gunman took him out with a harpoon gun before fleeing upstairs. After trailing the crook, Austin Powers and Mrs. Kensington watch as none other than Dr. Evil gets into a cryogenic chamber and then freezes himself until free love no longer reigns and greed and corruption rules again. 30 years would pass, but in 1997, when this movie released, the big boy rocket Dr. Evil froze himself in appeared on a US radar, then it disappeared in Nevada, presumably the same somewhere outside of Las Vegas as before. After realizing the seriousness of the situation, the US general packs his bags and heads for London. Over in Britain's Ministry of Defense, Basil Exposition informs their allies how Austin Powers froze himself in case Dr. Evil ever surfaced again, and then after walking past some frozen 80s and 90s icons, they get to Mr. Powers and start thawing out their legendary hero. And of course, he was frozen for a really long time, so we watch as he pees, and pees, and pees some more. Afterwards, he's still peeing. Okay, so he's still... Shout out to Reddit user Knee-High Mischief for taking me down this interesting little rabbit hole. A big inspiration for the plot of this movie was a show called Adam It Lives. Tell me if this sounds familiar at all. A British adventurer was frozen in a block of ice in 1902 by his nemesis, The Face. He was unfrozen during the swinging 60s, and the show is largely about his adventures adjusting to the new, unfamiliar world. And what I found more fascinating, though, was the Adam It Lives was only the fourth thing that the legendary Alien director Ridley Scott ever directed, and it was produced by the founding producer of Doctor Who, Verity Lambert. And here I was thinking this entire time, it was just a silly little James Bond spoof. So after experiencing lovely unfreezing side effects like losing control over the volume of his voice and his inner monologue, Austin Powers is ordered to continue his mission of bringing Dr. Evil to justice. But he won't be doing it alone because Mrs. Kensington is here to be his partner and get him acclimated to the 90s. Wait, did I say Mrs. Kensington? I meant Ms. Kensington, Mrs. Kensington's daughter, Vanessa. Before hitting the road, Austin Powers and Vanessa collect Austin's personal items from the 60s, including a wink wink nudge nudge zucchini pump, a receipt for a zucchini pump, and a self-authored book about owning a zucchini pump, all of which aren't his, of course. That sort of thing is my bag, baby. The officer kept referring to Austin as Danger Powers, and here's where I really commend Austin Powers' commitment to a bit, because roughly 30 years ago, he must have signed his name as Danger Powers, so he'd have the chance to correct someone and drop the line, "Danger's my middle name," to any potentially cute agents he'd be paired up with after being thawed out. But I digress. Back over to Dr. Evil's evil lair of evil. He was quite displeased with Mustafa because his unfreezing process caused the adorably fluffy Mr. Bigglesworth to lose all of his hair and look outright hateful now. So, like his fellow henchmen 30 years ago, Mustafa sent through the fiery trapdoors he ironically designed, but he doesn't die. He articulately wails from below until he can't be ignored, so Dr. Evil sends an underling to end Mustafa's misery. But he survives a gunshot too. After one more shot finally rings out, Mustafa met his quick and painless end. According to IMDb, the real name of Mr. Bigglesworth, the cat, was Ted Nugent, a reference to rock guitarist Ted Nugent. And I actually had a guinea pig as a kid named Mrs. Frigglesworth as a little homage. Moving on from there, we get the bad guy lineup. Frau Farbissina, founder of the militant wing of the Salvation Army, which is a Christian charity, by the way. And then Random Task, a Korean ex-wrestler who can knock your block off with a shoe. Then there's Paddy O'Brien, an ex-Irish assassin who leaves a keepsake from his Lucky Charm bracelet on all of his victims. Sadly for Paddy, the parallel to the Lucky Charm cereal commercial is totally lost on him, so he's just the laughing stock of the group. Our final villain is Dr. Evil's number 2 man, Number 2. And he's prosperously led Dr. Evil's ironically named company, Vericon, over the last 30 years. And speaking of the last 3 decades, they were much crazier than the bad doctor dreamed because all of his dastardly plans, like blackmailing Prince Andrew or destroying the ozone layer, have just happened naturally. After striking out twice, the doctor just goes with the old reliable and decides to hijack some nukes to hold the world hostage for $1 million. But when number 2 reminds Dr. Evil that inflation exists, he amends his amount to $100 billion. We get a peek at Dr. Evil's control panel, and on there he's listed number 4, number 5, number 6, and number 7, along with number 2, Frau Farbissina, and Scott, who we'll meet soon. But using that as a reference, we can assume that either Frau Farbissina or Scott is number 3, but my guess it's likely Frau Farbissina. I hope you like true crime, because the guy that plays Random Task almost got away with a despicable assault on a poor woman back in 1990, but DNA evidence caught up with him in 2008 and he went away for a while. But he made sure he would never see the light of day again by offing his cellmate while he was incarcerated. And I'm intentionally being vague, but CBS posted a 48 hours interview detailing all the gruesome events, so if you're curious, look it up there. Coincidentally, the victim owned this very movie, but understandably, she destroyed it after the news broke out. Back over to our good guy soaring around in Austin Powers' private jet. The style of the swinging 60s immediately clashes with the more modern sensibilities of the 90s, whereas Vanessa is trying to stay on task with the mission, but Austin is only concerned if his twig and berries are still working after being frozen. Even after Ms. Kensington brutally says she wouldn't sleep with Austin if he was the last man on Earth, he still playfully puts on the moves. He just cannot take the hint. Very briefly back over to the villains, we see Dr. Evil is just as emotionally stunted as his nemesis when Frau Farbissina introduces him to his artificially created son, Scott. However, Scott doesn't want anything to do with this dude that literally just popped into his life after all these years, even after Dr. Evil does the Macarena to show him how hip he is. More on those guys later, but back to Austin and Vanessa. They get a hotel under the guise of being a married couple visiting Vegas, but even so, after another wave of unsolicited pickup lines, Ms. Kensington still insists they strictly stay on task. Hey, who keeps putting that zucchini pump in Austin's luggage, honestly? But when the villains go downstairs, Vanessa gives Austin the rundown. British intelligence believes Dr. Evil is linked to the nefarious company Vericon, and plenty of their executives gamble here, so they're here to snoop around and see what they can learn. And she was right on the money. Number 2 and his secretary, a lot of Fachina, with an F, not a V. They were seated nearby, and here we get the obligatory tense gambling standoff scene we know and love from spy movies. Only in this one, it's obvious that Austin Powers is no James Bond and he has no idea what he's doing. But Austin does follow number 2 into the restroom where he'd bump into an overly friendly Texan who tries to use the stall next to him, but instead he overhears Austin fighting for his life against Paddy O'Brien. Then the Texan is none the wiser, so when Austin Powers is swirling the assassin, asking, "Who does number 2 work for?" the Texan is like, "Yeah, show that turd who's boss. Hey, how about a courtesy flush?" That scene is unapologetically juvenile, but I'm so here for it. I found a really interesting interview the most recent James Bond, Daniel Craig, did with the Bond fan magazine called MI6 HQ, where he talked about the impact Austin Powers had on the Bond franchise. Quote, "We had to destroy the myth because Mike Myers effed us. I'm a huge fan of Mike Myers, so don't get me wrong, but he kind of effed us, made it impossible to do the gags. What I'm proudest of in Skyfall is the lightness of the touch we've been able to bring back into it, but not lose the drama and action." End quote. You know, I'm just going to say the official score there is Austin Powers 1, James Bond goose egg. The following day, Austin Powers and Vanessa go to their next lead where they see Random Task carrying around Dr. Evil's cat that Powers confidently recognizes as Mr. Bigglesworth because he never forgets a pussy cat. Unfortunately, they lose their targets, but it dawns on Austin how truly stunning Vanessa is, so instead of corny pickup lines, he changes tactics and takes her on a magnificent date on the Vegas Strip, complete with live music, dancing, drinks, and the whole 9 yards. The fun continues all the way back to their hotel room where Austin Powers pulls out all the stops to keep being equal parts charming and entertaining. After a sufficient amount of goofing off, Vanessa invites Austin to bed where she tries to make a move on him, but he can tell she's far too inebriated for any business, so he gently turns her down. Instead, Vanessa just wants to hear about her mom from back in the day, but Powers mostly regrets how she had ended up with Mr. Kensington, and perhaps it seems like he wishes things had ended up differently. But Vanessa didn't hear a word of that heartfelt reflection because she passed out, and shortly after, Austin gets a message from Basil Exposition, ordering him to go to Alana Fachina's penthouse to learn about Project Vulcan. Side note, this is like the most shameless product placement ever here for AOL, and the director Jay Roach admitted to including it to get himself a free year of AOL, which was on 3.0 at the time, so get your bread, man, I don't know. The world's foremost spy has no trouble at all gracefully infiltrating Alana's apartment and snapping photos of all the documents detailing Project Vulcan, which seems to be some sort of massive nuclear-powered drill. Suddenly, Alana returns home to find Austin Powers seemingly waiting for her. Austin goes with his all reliable and tries to put the moves on Miss Fachina, but she flips the script and easily seduces him instead. And while Mr. Powers is distracted, Alana takes a peek at his ID and learns her guest is really the super spy Austin Powers. And real quick volume warning, but meanwhile, the rest of the villains were told that the super spy is closing in on their operation, so Frau Farbissina introduces everyone to the ultimate weapon she's created to kill Austin Powers. Bring in the fembots! Androids, which look like irresistible women, appear, and to demonstrate their capabilities, Frau sends in the guards to eliminate the fembots. However, their hesitation in the face of such beauty allows the bots to gun them down with their boob guns. The history of how Austin Powers came to be is actually somewhat mundane. Mike Myers' dad was a fan of British comedies, so Mike has always wanted to star in one himself. So one night while driving home from hockey practice, Canadian, sheesh, Mike started flirting with his first wife, Robin Rusin, in an English accent, and it was so funny, she convinced him to write down the routine, and that's ultimately what led to Austin Powers. Over in the makeshift British HQ, we get another obligatory spy movie moment when Austin is geared up with covert technology, including a GPS watch and a dentistry kit, which Austin incorrectly assumes is more spy stuff, when in fact, he just has terrible teeth and he needs to take the hint. Then Basil enters the room and Austin briefs him on what he learned about Project Vulcan last night, and Vanessa suggests that they should dress as tourists for the tour of Vericon to infiltrate the enemy base of operations. Quick note, Austin definitely saw Vanessa grimace after she heard that he had spent time with Alana Fachina to get that information. So later in their hotel room, Vanessa was feeling a little suspicious that her new romantic partner may have been a little less than faithful in the company of Alana, so she confronts him about it. Austin casually admits to doing the deed to get the docs, so understandably, Vanessa storms off while reminding her super spy that yet again times have changed. Confused, Austin pleads that she means everything to him, but she coldly responds while shutting the doors, "Welcome to the 90s. You're gonna be very lonely." And yeah, at least for now, her prediction comes true. Austin spends a night on the Vegas Strip flying solo, and his English attire and his throwback attitude make him seem like a joke to everybody. Defeated, he'd spend hours catching up on the last 30 years, and sadly, a lot of his friends have passed on. In the morning, Vanessa has her own moment of realization whenever she finds Austin in such a pitiful state, and it dawns on her just truly how much he's missed. But let's lighten the mood with a fun fact. Austin Powers' car, known as the Jaguar, is a 1961 Jaguar E-Type. So, funny enough, every Austin Powers movie was released in the same year as a James Bond movie. International Man of Mystery and Tomorrow Never Dies were released in 1997, The Spy Who Shagged Me and The World Is Not Enough were released in 1999, and Goldmember and Die Another Day were both released in 2002. All the Bond films also starred Pierce Brosnan as Bond. And if we're going by box office results, the James Bond movies won every round, so I'd say the final score of Austin Powers vs. Bond is a draw. Later, the dynamic duo catches a tour of Vericon to begin their infiltration, and Vanessa is still ruminating on Austin's infidelity, but he reassures her again that he only has eyes and feelings for her. Whenever the tour stops by some restrooms conveniently located near a restricted area, the spies follow some workers inside and take them out to wear their disguises. I love how the workers that go into the bathrooms were huge, but the uniforms Austin and Vanessa leave with fit perfectly. And anyone notice how Austin looks a little bit like the Love Guru here, kind of like a prototype version? Sorry, a lot of side quests in this video, but unfortunately, their absence from the tour is noticed almost immediately, so Austin has to judo chop his way past some henchmen and steal a steamroller. During the reckless high-speed getaway, one poor soul finds himself in Austin's path, so he screams, "No!" while Austin Powers screams for him to move. "No!" the man cries out again, hoping to avoid his fate, but there's literally nothing that he could do. He'd cry out, "No!" in vain for a few more seconds before the inevitable happens and he's crushed. Man, what a brave henchman. The dude that unavoidably got crushed is Lois Child's husband, and she played Dr. Holly Goodhead in a Bond movie called Moonraker. Also, Austin's glasses were modeled after the very same ones that Michael Caine's character used in a movie from 1965 called The Ipcris File. In a fantastic full-circle moment, when Michael Caine played Austin Powers' dad, Nigel, in the third installment, Goldmember, he brought the actual glasses that he had used in The Ipcris File with him. Just as Vanessa and Austin think they're in the clear, random task appears behind them, knocks them out, and takes our heroes to Dr. Evil's underground lair, just in time for his demonstration of the Vulcan to the world leaders he's holding hostage. Here we learn the nuclear-powered drill is designed to penetrate the Earth's inner layers, causing all of the volcanoes around the world to erupt at once, effectively killing everything. Afterwards, Scott joins his father, Number 2, and Frau Farbissina, and he's introduced to his father's nemesis, Austin Powers. Then we check off our next obligatory James Bond trope, whenever Dr. Evil shares that he's going to put Powers in an easily escapable situation involving an overly elaborate and exotic death. Just as Blofeld intended, right? And while this is meant to be a proud father-son moment, Scott thinks his dad's plan is stupid and suggests they just cap him right now. Real quick, has anyone ever noticed how a lot of vagina nearly breaks character whenever Random Task has to scooch Dr. Evil's chair back to the table because he rolled away? Look for it on your next watch. I thought it was pretty funny. Anyways, as the spies are being put in an easily escapable situation, Dr. Evil shares the most dastardly part of his plan. Even after the ransom is paid, he still intends on using Project Vulcan to cover the world in liquid-hot magma. Then our heroes are told that their overly elaborate and exotic death will be sharks with frickin' lasers attached to their heads. But then the Doc is given some bad news by his own cycloptic right-hand man, Number 2. Sharks were put on the endangered species list in the last 30 years, so instead of sharks, they have ill-tempered sea bass. Right. Austin Powers and Vanessa are escorted to a chamber, then the mastermind orders his henchmen to start the unnecessarily slow-moving dipping mechanism. And since surely nothing can go wrong, Dr. Evil orders the kill chamber to be closed, and Scott asks why he isn't even gonna make sure that the trap works. Again, Scott offers to get a weapon and just take the spies out, but the more sense he tries to make with his dad, the more he's shushed. Knock knock, who's there? Shush. And this comedic gold was improvised by Seth Green and Mike Myers. Inside the chamber, Austin Powers and Vanessa only have all the time in the world to barely think of a plan to escape. Vanessa breaks out some floss, and at this point, the Englishman takes the hint about his bad teeth, but she was actually suggesting they use the ordinary floss as a rope to swing their way to safety. Powers then judo chops a tube of toothpaste to blind the guard so he and Vanessa can both swing on the totally regular-ass string of floss and narrowly escape the easily escapable situation with an overly elaborate and exotic death. They continue their escape on a cart while zipping down a cramped hallway, but then they spot an emergency exit, so Vanessa plans to go call for backup while Austin stays behind to watch his nemesis. Before she leaves, Austin promises to commit to only her if she'd have him back, but she only tells him to behave. Which means yes in groovy English or whatever Austin's accent is. But then after executing a flawless 57-point turn, Austin Powers finally gets the car turned around and he's off to stop Dr. Evil. However, while navigating this labyrinth of a lair, Austin stumbles into a rather romantic-looking room with whom we, the attentive audience, recognize as the Fembots. He initially falls for their siren song, but after a short while, he snaps out of it and tries to leave, but he's stopped by the androids claiming that he can't resist them. Powers claims that actually, the exact opposite is true, and then he proves it by doing a dance so shagadelic, the robot's heads start exploding. Unfortunately, he had chucked his drawers during the dance, so he had a lot of explaining to do whenever Vanessa arrives with backup and sees him in such a compromising scene, after he had promised to be monogamistic, no less. But Vanessa rocks, thankfully, and she believes his explanation, so they get back to stopping the Doctor. While all that craziness was going on, Dr. Evil was enacting his evil plan of launching Project Vulcan. Just as the madman begins the 3-minute-long drilling process, Austin Powers, Vanessa, and all their reinforcements blow up a wall and storm in guns ablazing to stop the drill before it ends the world. Then after running and gunning past all of the bad guys, the world's foremost super spy hits the conveniently located abort button at the last possible second. Using the Wayback Machine, I read an article on a site called Split Slider that detailed the roles Jim Carrey missed. Interestingly, in that article I learned that Mike Myers didn't initially plan on playing both Austin Powers and Dr. Evil, and Jim Carrey was in talks to play the Doctor. However, it fell apart due to scheduling conflicts with Liar Liar, but it all worked out because Mike Myers wrote Dr. Evil's mannerisms based on his time around the infamous SNL producer Lorne Michaels, and no doubt, no one could have executed that better than he did. Dr. Evil's appearance, however, was based on Donald Pleasance's version of the James Bond villain Blofeld. You may recognize Donald Pleasance from playing Dr. Samuel Loomis from Halloween, but if you like horror, go check out my video on Scream. Austin hurries and catches up with Dr. Evil while he's trying to call for his beloved cat, but now that Dr. Evil's back is against the wall, He tries to make his nemesis question what he's fighting for by pointing out all the things that he loved in the 60s are now shunned here in the 90s. But Austin articulately counters that the 60s lifestyle was always about freedom, and it was designed to protest greedy people just like Dr. Evil. Dr. Evil then drops the fancy talk and hits Austin with the low blow, saying that there's nothing more pathetic than an aging hipster, so Austin Powers matches the Doc's energy by saying, "Shut up, Baldy, let's go." Stuff happens pretty fast from here, and the rivals keep exchanging who has the upper hand. First, Alana enters the room with Vanessa as a hostage, but then Scott enters, so Austin takes him as a hostage. However, it seems like Dr. Evil doesn't care about his artificially created son at all, so the kid just scorns his father and runs away like a girl. But if that betrayal wasn't enough, Number 2 strolls through with a couple of suitcases, one of which totally doesn't have the body of a fembot in it, but he's actually here to side with Austin Powers, claiming he's fed up with how Dr. Evil has taken the evil empire he's built over the last 30 years and squandered it on a childish goal of world domination. But number 2 was doing an awful lot of backstabbing for someone sitting in a chair leading to a flaming trapdoor, so his former boss fires his ass. That distraction gives Vanessa enough time to judo chop Alana, but in the scuffle that ensues, Dr. Evil escapes in another cryogenic pod after hitting the base's self-destruct button. They only have 30 seconds before everything goes up in flames, so everybody flees like rats on a sinking ship. Now, let's close things out, and trust me, the ending has a lot of visual censorship gags that I can't do justice in the audio format, but aside from that, Austin and Vanessa Powers were enjoying a honeymoon getaway 3 months later whenever Basil Exposition gives them the update that they've lost tracking on the rocket Dr. Evil escaped in. But it's not all bad news though, because Basil is pleased to share that Vanessa is being promoted and Austin is being knighted. Their blissful evening would be interrupted by a knock at the door, but Austin just ordered champagne, so all is well. But actually all was not well, because instead of getting champagne, Random Task throws a shoe at Austin's head. Honestly, man, who throws a shoe? But thanks to Vanessa and a nearby zucchini pump, which still isn't Austin's, they fend off their would-be final assassin and then go stargazing on the terrace. But while appreciating the stars, a seemingly new one stands out. But upon further inspection, it turns out to be Dr. Evil drifting in his frozen capsule, with Mr. Bigglesworth still vowing revenge on his nemesis, Austin Powers. Well, that's a wrap on Austin Powers. I hope you enjoyed it or learned something new. No buzzer beater facts this time, but if anyone was playing the James Bond drinking game for James Bond fans only, I wanted to say sorry for saying James Bond so much. Remember to subscribe for more movie content, but honestly, man, who doesn't hit subscribe after getting this far into a video? I appreciate you guys, but until next time, y'all be good. Hey, you made it to the end. Remember, if you want to revisit any more of your favorite movies, check the links on screen, but otherwise, subscribe and I'll catch you for a new breakdown next week. Thanks.